Well, welcome to the video. In this video, we'll cover Prelude to Crisis 1 and 2. This is part of the Ultimate Half-Baked Bitcoin Analysis series. You'll find a link to the document and other videos down below. So let's jump in and let's get started. So we're going to be in the chart in this video. So here's what we're going to cover in the chart. We're going to cover not only the current price action just briefly, but then we're going to go back to May 2017 and we're going to talk about the pre-mass awareness phase, the early adopter phase. I'll share what I think is one of the most important price action days in Bitcoin's history, and then we'll set up the price action to talk about Crisis 1 and 2. So first up, where we're at in Bitcoin today, it's May 6th, and it's actually done something pretty significant because what it has done is price has closed below the value channel that it's been trading in since early January 2022. It's kind of a big thing. We'll see if it actually holds up the low here or the actual level that exists here, and maybe it comes back up and trades within the channel. One thing I'll share is I do have a page of a running analysis of Bitcoin. So whatever the latest updates of Bitcoin and how I'm trading it and how I'm looking at it is shared on this page. That's linked down below. If it's not here, then basically the latest update here is how I'm viewing Bitcoin and how I'm actually trading Bitcoin. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely check out that page and bookmark that page. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to May 2017. And we go back to this particular time in the chart because before May 2017 is what we'll consider the pre-mass awareness early adopter phase. I did have some friends talking, or a friend talking to me about Bitcoin back in kind of the early 2017 time. I wish I would have listened and really paid attention and really dived into the white paper. I would have got it. It took me a while. I got it here right around this first inflection area. But everything before May 2017 is early adopter phase. You can look at the statistics. We could dive into this if I really wanted to. We could dive into the statistics and we could say right around this area here of June, May of 2017, and when it really first hit the first 3,000 level, is when the uptick in sentiment, the uptick in trends, the uptick in awareness, the uptick in Bitcoin getting into the financial markets started to really hit and started to really steamroll a little bit. So everything before this inflection area right here is early adopter phase. After this inflection area, what we call it is mass awareness phase, and that's mainly because the run to right around short of 20,000. You could argue that you could look at the news articles, you could look at just the sentiment, you could argue that there was very little people in the world that didn't hear of Bitcoin at that point in time. It really was at a mass awareness stage. So that's kind of setting the groundwork for the early adopter phase. Right here, right around the 3K level, is right where mass awareness stage starts to happen. Now all this centers on one of the most important days in Bitcoin trading history, September 15, 2017. We'll get to that here in a second. But let's first talk about the first inflection area. Okay, so the first inflection area is right here. And it starts right around May 2017. And it goes to, this is the first value channel that you can look at and say that this inflection area held up after the mass awareness started to happen. So this is early mass awareness phase. And we have a key level here of 3,000. And so this first inflection area right here on this day here on 17 July 2017, it did something that is pretty important in the trade system that I've developed and that I trade that's highly effective. Is it not only recaptured momentum in this area, but it recaptured this yellow line, which is the RDA. And to show you how powerful this RDA is as far as an indicator, this is the second time, and we'll talk about this day, when it actually captured the RDA again. So it recaptured the RDA on 15 September. It didn't break that RDA indicator. It didn't tell you to get out of the chart or to get out of the trade until roughly January 16, 2018. At around $12,000. You did get signals early to get out of the trade in my trade system way up here. So using my trade system, you did get signals to get out early. But I just wanted to share for those that are maybe not quite as familiar with the trade system, there's multiple reasons why this area of the chart is really important. A lot of that is the highly effective trade system that I trade. So that's the lens that you're getting some of this analysis through. So the first thing is we have this first major inflection area just before, just as mass awareness is starting to hit. And what happens, which is pretty important here, is price comes up, and it not only comes up and it retests almost the 5, or it actually comes up and does a 5K test level. So if you go back and you look at the stories, there was a huge amount of an interest in stories once this happened. So this run from 3K to 5K really started the push for Bitcoin to be what it is today. It's this time frame right here, the stories, the narratives that started to be talked about. So this pullback here, coming back to this inflection area, is really, really important, because this is where Bitcoin could have failed in price. And if it would have failed in price, the narrative that it's going to hold $3,000 and it's going to break $5,000 would have been shot. So this day here, September 15th, 2017, is one of the most important days in Bitcoin's price history, because what it does is it does something that it really had to do, which is it came back from a high of $5,000 and it pulled back roughly about 40%, and it stopped exactly as a chartist, as someone that trades charts would like to see. It stops at a prior inflection area. It could have gone as far as 50% for it to still fit the rules, for the rules that we trade. But the fact that it stopped at the top of this value channel and then went, and that same day, if we just scroll in here, so it pulled back roughly 40% in that move. And on this day, it recaptured the Rexdog average, it recaptured the RDA, and then from that point forward, it held the RDA and it held momentum. And it held momentum all the way up till, we just go here, the mass awareness high, the first all-time high of Bitcoin, which is just shy of $20,000. Happened in 2019. Now, before we cover this all-time high and setting up the prelude to crisis 1 and 2, let's just recap what we just covered here. Just there's a couple key things that I want to add that I didn't probably talk about, which is, number one, this area of the chart is a statistical model for how you can trade Bitcoin. There's statistical numbers in here, value ranges, how Bitcoin typically trades. Another important aspect is that it creates the stopping volume pattern that you can look for here, which is right around September 11, 2017 to September 18, 2017, right around there. That's a stopping volume pattern that holds up, especially when you're near a value range and you're looking for a stopping volume pattern for it to continue and capture momentum and recapture the RDA, for instance. So this whole area of the chart is a statistical area that you can use as a model to then come up with a great trade plan for how to trade Bitcoin. It's held up, and it's traditionally held up, and it's still holding up today. I'll leave it at that. For members, we can talk about that more in the Den and Trade Room Alpha. Now let's talk about the actual all-time high. This is why the all-time high is important. First up, when you have a high, you can start marking off some key levels like the 50%, the 75%, the 25%. I don't trade Fibonacci, so I don't really care about the Fibonacci levels. I think just these round 25, 75, and 50% levels are good enough. So let's talk about that. Let's start marking up the chart from that perspective. So the first thing that we'll identify is we have the all-time high here, the first mass awareness all-time high, right around 17 December 2017. I think I said 2019 before, so I do apologize. So the first all-time high right around $20,000. Now when you have that high, what you can obviously start doing as a chartist, is you can start marking off the 50% level. It's just really easy. You just go down 50%. We do see here this level right here, right around 9,800 is the 50% level or so. So that's an important level. You also have the 75%, you have various other levels. So when you have an all-time high, you have to just think back to this narrative and think back to what was happening during this time. Of course, all this bubble talk. Is Bitcoin really, is it a bubble? Is it going to even take out those 19,000 highs again? Right here around 16 January 2018, this candle here, You do see here, this is the first candle where it broke the RDA. This is the actual yellow line you see here. When it does that, and it solidly does that, especially as the momentum continues to hold, you would be biased short, and you would be looking at really just taking a short position. Now, back here is really where you got the early clues back here that there was some weakness in Bitcoin with the momentum indicators. But this is the official RDA, where basically, look, it broke the RDA. It's now time to start thinking short. So when you come to that, then you can earmark the 50% level like we have here. And you'll see it sold off. I mean, I'm not going to go chart or go level by level, but what I will do is I'll just share the narrative so that we can set up Prelude, set up Crisis 1 and 2. So the first thing is you've got the 50% level. That's key. So the second that it gave that up right here, was trading around it, above it. It did try to make a move here back in March 18, but the second that it gave it up here, right here at this level, the 50% mark on 8 March 2018, is really where you have to start looking and saying, okay, how low is it going to go? Is it going to test the first inflection area that we talked about before, the first major inflection area? And if so, does it hold up? And that's really the prelude to the crisis, which is, when I say crisis, you can look at the chart and you can say, okay, there's a very clear thing that the chart is telling you within price action that is telling you whether or not this asset is viable. You can see these key important points right here. Is you've got the first major area of failure is 13% from the high. The second major failure is 41% of the high. Really, the most important failure that we see here is right here, right on 5 May 2018, right around that date, 6 May 2018. This one plays an especially important role because, number one, it gives up 50% of the all-time high. You'll also see this red line here. That is the mixed 200 average. So what that is that's the average between the 200 MA and the 200 EMA. So it gave up the mixed 200 average. You could also argue this is probably maybe the start of the first crisis. I argue that it's a little bit back here, and we'll get into that in the first crisis video. But you could say this is the start of the first crisis. Why? Because it gave up the 50% of the all-time high. That's a clear level that anybody could talk about, any talking head on the news, any person could say, well, it gave up 50% of a value, it's not holding that, it's going to zero. The other important aspect here is it actually did give up momentum. It gave up right here on this day, 11 May, it gave up, well, it officially gave up the RDA on 10 May. It gave up momentum on this day as well. And then from there, it traded well below the RDA and momentum short held all the way up until this point here. So that's the prelude to the crisis. As we get closer to the crisis that unfolds here, what we have here is what you can start doing, and I know I'm going fast or just advanced, but I just want to get through this so that obviously people trading the system, people that understand this, you know what I'm talking about. But the second that we have the 50% level traded, and then we have a low like here, we can then draw that value channel. So we could have started drawing the value channel back here in February 2018, and we did, and right around April 2018. But the second we have this low here, right around 5,800, you can start drawing a value channel. And then the value channel and how it trades within that value channel from the 50% level and the new low is levels that you would watch. You can see here the purple is 50%. So it came down, created the low for the value channel, came back up, recaptured the RDA, and it failed right around the mixed 200. So it's kind of a reaction level we would expect. You'll see this weekly level here, it gave up and it really sold off back to this level. So from this point forward, you're really watching the key value channel levels, which is the 50% and the 75%, and you're seeing how does it trade around that. And we see that it gave up the 50% level, and back here it gave up the 75% level, and it started trading there. This point here, this candle here, 14 November 2018, is really start of the crisis. This crisis really starts officially 19 November, but here is where you would say the beginning of the crisis is, where you can then start drawing an additional value channel for the lows. And to set up what I'm going to talk about in the next video is everything from this point forward, the all-time highs, and that you can mark off the 50% level, the only thing that matters going forward at this point in time is you have the all-time high price, right, short of $20,000, and then you have the 50% price. That's the only thing that matters in the narrative of whether or not Bitcoin's going to survive. Is it going to recapture that? The other narrative that you have on the downside is it going to hold the first inflection area that the model of Bitcoin has really followed, that the trading of Bitcoin has followed? And that's what we'll talk about in the next video. So just to recap this video, just real quick, we have the first inflection area back here that you can use as a model. That is as the first mass awareness. When you look at sentiment in Bitcoin, this is the first time right around this area, June to August, May to August 2017 is when the narrative of Bitcoin really started to get into the popular culture. From that point forward, once you have 5,000 and it breaks, it's starting to just gain steam, especially as this whole move. The second that you have the all-time high, the mass awareness high, you can start marking off the key points, whether or not it's going to survive, whether or not this asset's going to survive. The next video in this series actually will be using Amazon as an example. So I'll just use this as an example before we get into Crisis 1 and 2. But as you can see here, you have the 50% level, trades within the channel. You have various levels within the channel to trade against. And then as it comes out and it gets into Crisis 1, this is really where Crisis 1 starts. And from this point forward, the only levels that matter are the inflection level from the bottom, the 50% all-time high, and the all-time high. That's the only levels that really matter and that really carry the narrative forward. So the next video in this series will be using Amazon as an example from the .com era. I'd like to give I could probably give 15 to 20, 30 different examples, but we'll use Amazon because that's the well-known one. And we'll use that as a model of talking about Crisis 1 and 2. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.